A knight in armour and his horse go together like eggs and bacon. But what was the relationship between the man and the beast? How did they work together and how did they train? I've been riding horses since I was 8 years old, and I've been training them since I was a teenager. So I have some experience about training of horses, but it's only recently, only in the last decade of my life, that I've been interested in the kind of medieval side of it, trying to rediscover some of the techniques. And what I've found is kind of interesting. We think of dressage as a horse sport that is very specifically about horse dancing and horse maneuvering. But in fact, the origins of dressage go back to war training. You need to move your horse sideways to strike a target. You need to be able to go forwards, you need to be able to go backwards, and you need to be able to maneuver very, very well. And basically, dressage is the art of maneuvering your horse well. I loved animals since I can remember, and horses and dogs have particular affection in my life. And the idea of being able to work with an animal, rather than just having it as a companion, but also having it as something that you can do something with. You can travel, you can share experiences, you can do show jumping, you can do cross country, you can go for long rides. That has always appealed to me. And the medieval side of it was relatively unknown. I didn't know anybody that was interested in uncovering the secrets of the past when it comes to that. So I read a series of books called the Silver Brumbies series, which are all about wild horses in Australia. And as a result of that, I fell in love with the idea of horses. And unusually for a young man, I suppose, I pony club and I joined all the sort of things. And basically it was mostly a female sport, mostly a girl sport. And I was one of the few blokes actually riding at pony club. I won best boy 2 years in a row out of a field of 3. I was lucky enough to have horses in my life. I had a couple of horses and I competed at quite a high level. I was also reasonably academic, and I was fascinated by biology and evolution and all those kind of aspects of things. And I managed to win a place at Oxford University to study zoology. That was my area of speciality, was the animal kingdom, and I loved it. I loved natural history programs. I loved the natural world in general, but I also loved animal behavior. And animal behavior is a very interesting area. You need to watch animals. You need to almost observe them for hundreds of hours to actually see the subtle movements. Horses communicate to each other by body language, by posture, by approach, the shape of their ears, the shape of their nostrils, the shape of their eyes. And if you're not with a horse for a long time, you don't see these symbols, you don't recognize them. I can look at somebody riding a horse and I can say whether the horse is paying attention to the rider or paying attention to something else. And I can watch a movie and I can watch actors riding, and you can see that the horse is a bit unsure of the rider on its back, or in some cases you can see that the rider is very good and the horse is very relaxed. So for me, observation and scientific experimentation are a really important part of uncovering the past. Next time, I'm going to introduce you to my horses, show you what they can do and how they fitted into the medieval world. These days, horses are defined by their type, their species, their breeding. In medieval times, though, we think horses were defined more by the job they did and what they were useful for. So you have a lot of words for the different types of medieval horse, and there's some debate about what they actually mean. But to give you some idea of what I think they were, we've got some examples of the type of horse that might have been around in medieval times. First of all, I'm going to show you an all-rounder. This is Bramble. She is a Welsh mountain pony. She is strong enough to carry me from place to place happily. She is a very solid creature, lovely to ride. But she's not particularly tall, so she's nice and easy to get on and off, and does the job incredibly well. She's not particularly high status. She's not a fancy colour. She doesn't have sort of stylish breeding or anything like that. She doesn't come from an exotic place. In fact, she comes from the Welsh mountains, so she's a native breed of the British horse. But she does the job incredibly well. She probably wouldn't have been too expensive to buy back in medieval times. And she doesn't eat too much, so she's not too expensive to look after. And she isn't particularly high maintenance when it comes to getting sick or doing the wrong thing or injuring herself. So she's a very solid choice for somebody of middle status to get around. So there's your typical Rouncey, your typical practical everyday horse for riding. Now we'll move up to what I would consider to be a palfrey. Now, palfreys were ridden by knights, but they were also ridden by ladies and by people of higher status. And probably a palfrey was a little bit taller, a little bit finer boned, just as capable of practical use. Silver here is an example of the type of horse I think might have been a palfrey. So he's a gelding, he's still big and strong, he's got good feet, and he is very comfortable to ride. He is fairly fine boned, so he looks good if you're dressed up in all your posh medieval kit. He can still carry a knight in armour or a lady. We've done jousts on him very successfully, so he's a very brave horse as well, but he's not quite the pinnacle of battle horse that many people will link with the knight. He could be used in war, and in fact we have records of people insisting that you bring a certain number of palfreys to war, or coursers, which is another type of horse. But a typical destrier is the sort of horse I'm going to show you next. Ghost here is from the Iberian Peninsula. He, in modern day terms, isn't a particularly tall horse, but he is very strongly muscled and very, very good at carrying an explosive speed. He has a certain look of nobility. He's a particular type of horse, which is called a cremello, which is a double dilute for those of you interested in genetics. He's about as light coloured as a horse can get. So he's incredibly fine. He's very pink skinned, and he's got blue eyes, which a lot of people find quite striking. And I'm sure in medieval times would have been much sought after. But because he's a stallion, he has this incredible crest of muscle. Stallions fight other stallions in the wild, and this muscle is part of that combat package. This also means he's very strong at carrying somebody in armour. And horse armour that we have in museums is designed to fit over a crest like this on a horse. You can see how when he bends his neck, you can see this beautiful crest, which is also covered up by his beautiful long fancy mane, which again is part of his value. In medieval times, your horse helped define you as a person. So if you had a really fancy horse that was really expensive, that would tell everybody who you were and what your business was. So a fancy horse is kind of important, and a destrier as much so as before. He's got very strong forelimbs, a very strong back. He is surprisingly brave. He's in training though, so he isn't a medieval horse, he's a modern horse. He's trained for dressage, but we are in the process of training him for medieval combat. He's taking to it very well, but we have to go quite slowly because he's just not used to it. And of course, back in medieval times, he would have been selected and trained from it from a very early age. But because he's a little older, we've got to take it more steadily. But he is doing very, very well, and he is incredibly powerful in his movements and strength of purpose. One of the things we're going to show you in a later program is training Ghost. So we'll show you the techniques we use to convince him that medieval battlefield isn't as scary as everybody says. Obviously we're not going to really fight with him, but we will train him much like modern day police horses are trained. We need to train him to get used to all sorts of things that are going on. Good boy. Good lad. This is a very large horse, but he's very young. This is Talos. He's half Shire, half Spanish, and his size is a bit deceptive because he's actually only 4.5 years old, which means as a horse, his joints haven't properly formed yet. He might be about as tall as he's going to get, but all of his joints, all of his spine and everything haven't developed properly. So you have to be very, very gentle with a horse and not ride them too much until they're about 5 or 6 years old, depending on the breed. 5 or 6 years old, you can be a bit more active and do a little bit more. But what we're going to do now is do a little bit of training on the ground and riding with the Quintane, because he needs to get used to this and this isn't going to be too difficult for him. Good boy. So the first thing we do is just walk him up to the Quintane. Good boy. Now, obviously, he's seen many posts and sticks and all sorts of things in his life, but he won't have seen anything like this spinning around. So this is the thing that's probably going to might freak him out a bit. Good boy. Take it past his head. He's actually doing it really, really well. Good boy. The noise of it, we can swing it a bit more, swing it a bit more. There's the noise. Good boy. You can see that he's not particularly stressed out by it, but he's aware of it. Good boy. Quite close to your head there. You're very big. Good. So that's the first stage. You're just familiarizing him with the device itself, and then we're going to ride past it a few times before we even try touching or using a lance. Good boy. Good lad. If you can't move the horse to the mounting block, move the mounting block to the horse. That should be an expression there. Right. We're on. Now let's walk him past the Quintane a few times. Good lad. Good boy. Good lad, come on. Come on you. Good boy. Good lad. Come on. Oh, round you come. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Not too much of a problem at all. He's very good with it. Good lad. Past it straight. Good boy. I'll get a dummy lance now and actually try tapping against the Quintane and see how he gets on. Good boy. You can couch it. Good practice for me. More of a push than a hit. Good boy. Come on. Come round. Good boy. And the other side. Good boy. We'll go around again. Good lad. Looks like he's absolutely fine with this. That was a bit harder. Now, one of the annoying things about Quintane is when it gets in the wrong orientation to actually hit, you have to come back, spin it yourself, unless you've got ground crew. But it's also good training for him because I'm doing something above his back, and we'll go a little bit faster now. And you'll notice I'm also neck reining him. I'm riding with one hand because I'm using a weapon. Good boy. That is part of the training too. I'm using my legs, but also riding him one-handed. Come on. Good lad. So, all in all, I would say that was incredibly successful. He's done very well. He's got a long way to go, but so far, so good. It looks like he's completely okay with impacts. And the Quintane's done its early job, which is wonderful to see. So training against the Quintane doesn't have to be all blood and sweat and tears. You can just take it gently and use it as a target, but it is an important part of the process of training a horse for war. Certainly for training it for the joust, but I think for war as well. Thank you. A horse's natural instinct is to run away from threats. Threats like the stench of blood on the battlefield, the sight of bodies on the ground, the noise of weapons on shields, the clatter of armour, the shininess of armour. So how do we get a horse used to that? Well, the answer is training. I've got a few ideas. Let's have a look at how I think the training might have been done. Yeah, Mum. Good boy. Good lad. So, Ghost is in quite a frightened mood, so I've got to take that into account when I'm training him. So I have here something that's going to make a noise shortly, and he seems okay about it. So here's how you would start training a horse. You just Good boy, good boy. You see his fear reaction. It's quite strong on that side, not on this side so much. You can see him tensing up. Good boy. Good boy. Walk on. Good boy. Good boy. And you can see how far Ghost is from actually being able to fight in a battle yet. Even though he's a stallion, he's still quite nervous about things. Good boy. But he's relaxing. He's relaxing. You can see his ears. His ears show you what he's focused on. So when there's a noise, this is, walk on. This is not making much noise, nor is it shiny. So my armour is in a bag so that it's not the shininess as well. But, good boy. Good boy. So I stop it, rub it on him, let him relax, and then get his attention again. Good boy. Good boy. Praising him all the time. Come on then. Good boy. What I'm not doing is facing him this way. This is a threat to a horse. My eyes look forwards, his eyes look sideways. If I'm looking at him, it's the sign of a predator and he's prey. So I'm keeping an eye on his face and his eyes, and when he's looking away, he's relaxing entirely. He's looking at other things, but now he's looking at this. Good boy. Get him to walk with me. Good boy. Walk towards the threat. Good lad. He's relaxing a little bit. So from the time I was here to where I am now, he's already relaxed a little bit. What I'm going to do now is try to see how Warlord behaves with simulated dead bodies. I have no idea whether they did this in medieval times, but it strikes me as an important component of training a warhorse. So we're going to have a go. I have no idea what he's going to do, but that's the whole point of training. You've got to react and see what the horse does. Good boy. Come on. Come on. Good boy. So you can see he's not particularly happy with it. Good boy. Come on. Come on. Come on. No, 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 no. Shush, shush, shush. Good boy. Come on then. Come on. Come on. Good boy. Come on. Well, he's walking round them. Come on. Come on. Good boy. Let's try you a bit faster. Right. Good boy. Yeah, I suppose in some ways he is trying to miss if he can. So that's interesting. It would make sense actually. You don't want to deliberately tread on people necessarily if they're dead, but he has trodden on limbs right in the middle of chests. So I reckon that's how you would have done it. Train with dummies, get the horse used to it. A horse shouldn't try to tread on bodies unless, I guess, you could train it to do that. Broadly speaking, he seems to be okay in, what, a few minutes. Now, nobody's making a noise, there's no smell of blood, there's no armour on them, but this is the beginnings of the kind of training you would need to do, I think, to get warhorses used to a battlefield. Good boy, well done, Warlord. Good boy, hey? I'm going to try mounting up and riding over the bodies now. I'm going to do a bit of training for myself as well. Two reasons for wearing this. One is I don't normally ride with a safety helmet on, but given the circumstances, I'm going to wear a safety helmet, but it's going to be a contemporary medieval safety helmet. So this sallet, I'm going to put this on. This will have the effect of training me as well, because it will train my neck muscles as I ride. And it's important that I don't just train Warlord, I train myself. And it keeps me a bit warmer as well. Good boy, right? And what I will do, I will try to get closer and closer I'm not going to throw him straight in at the deep end. I'm going to get closer and closer and eventually, almost by accident, try and walk over one of the simulated corpses. Well, I'm just going to go for it, see what happens. Good boy. Good boy. Well, no problem at all. In fact, it's arguably easier when I'm on his back than when I'm leading him. He doesn't want to go at speed particularly. Can't blame him. Good boy. Good boy. That was surprisingly easy. I thought I'd have to take longer to get him used to the bodies on the ground. So it shows that in a fairly short space of time, with a horse that's well trained in other ways, you will be able to get him to deal with corpses just strewn across the battlefield. I think he'd cope. Also, with all the adrenaline going through him and me on a battlefield, I don't think corpses are getting in the way at all. In fact, the only thing that's dangerous about them is tripping up on them and them getting in the way and bringing you down. So you'd want to be careful. You don't want to deliberately go across corpses, but at the same time, I don't think a row of corpses would be in any way an impediment to the mounted knight on the medieval battlefield. You can see how a horse's natural reaction to danger is to back away. And then you've just got to let them relax, realize it's not a threat, and then they settle down. You will never take all of the prey animal from a horse. No matter how brave that horse is, there will always be something that will tip it over the edge. Hopefully, with the right kind of training, that won't affect you in battle itself. But you never know. And it is written in the chronicles that some horses, once they'd been in one battle, that was it. That horse was done, would never go into battle again. It's tragic to think of that, all that time and energy, but that horse's spirit for battle was potentially broken by one single encounter.
Hello everybody, I'm just quickly getting Gossamer ready because there's an opportunity for training her. We've got some blank firing muskets, black powder muskets up at the top of the field, and we're doing a piece for a bigger show, and Gossamer's never experienced gunfire before. So it's a fantastic opportunity to put her in a safe situation away from any danger, but also to kind of encourage her to understand about gunfire. And there's a film crew up there as well, which is always a bit more stressful for a horse. So she's nearly ready to go. I'll just put the saddle on. Even when you are, even when you're rushing, thank you, Talos and Ghosty. Even when you're rushing, it's important to make sure your kit on your horse is properly secured. Nothing worse than the girth failing or a bridle not being attached properly. That causes a lot of danger. So, yeah, even when you're rushing, just do it properly. Right, I'm going to get on her and ride up to see what's going on with the guns. I wonder how she'll be. We'll find out in a little bit. Good girl. All right, come on. When we get up there, we're going to be very careful because it's incredibly hot and horses overheat much more quickly than human beings do. They've just got a greater body mass. So we're not going to do anything strenuous at all today. And any sign of too much stress will bring her straight back. So it'll be an interesting experience for her. Just developing her mind a little bit and her confidence about things in general that she's going to encounter in some of the activities we do. Good girl. Come on then. Walk up. Up top about 50 yards away from the shooting, just bringing a horse to them just to get her used to it. So I'm going to go a bit closer now and see what's happening. I think she's actually more concerned about the equipment that's up here because we're making the hay. I think she's a bit more worried about that, which is interesting because there's double threats to her. We've got farm machinery here, lorries, bits and pieces of tarpaulin and hay bales, as well as musketeers. So there's quite a lot going on for her, bless her. She's doing incredibly well. She's doing ever so well, but the flash of the gunfire, there's no noise actually from the guns, but it's just a flash. So it's really useful as an introduction to her, to that kind of thing. She hasn't got a clue what's going on, but she's doing very well.
One more, but I think one more place down there.
When a horse is nervous, what you've got to do is keep them moving. So walking around in circles, their fight or flight response is actually about running away. They get more and more nervous if they're held in one place. So if you walk them in a small circle, that gets rid of some of the adrenaline. I am going to take her back now. She's done a very good job, and I think we've done enough for now. Well, that was very good. Gossamer was still quite stressed out by it, but that's to be expected. It's her first experience of all of those things, and there's actually a lot more going on up there than you think. As a human being, you think just muskets, but in fact there was water carriers, lots of buckets, lots of people, lots of strange things, and all the tractors. So it was a lot more stressful than it could have been, but she handled it very well. I kept her moving. She was jumping around a bit. I wouldn't expect her to be completely calm at this stage of her training, but she's done incredibly well, and we'll put her in now. She can cool down and have some nice water and some hay. Thank you. So we'll just untack her and let her relax. Good girl. Good girl. Back. Good girl.
Good lad. This is Ghost. He's another warhorse in training I've got here. He is very powerful. He's not a particularly tall horse, but he is a stallion, so he has a lot of strength here. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is to try to give people who don't understand about horses some familiarity with what horses can actually do and how they can move. Because in our modern society, horses are more or less pets for a lot of people. They're a leisure activity. But back in the medieval period, of course, horses were essential tools for farmers, for people going to market, and most importantly for knights fighting on the battlefield. So I think medieval people would have had a much more solid understanding of what a horse can do and the importance of a horse in their lives. So I think medieval people might have seen horses in a different way than we do. Horses were fundamentally important. If you were wealthy enough and travelling to market, your horse was your form of transport. If you were a knight or a lord going to war, your horse was your battle platform. And so I think today there aren't many people who have horses in their lives to a large extent, or to the same extent that they would have done in medieval times. And so I thought a basic primer on what a horse can do might be quite useful. I'm going to get on Ghost now, and for that I use a mounting block. Now I can get on Ghost very easily from the ground, but a mounting block saves me and it saves his back, most importantly. So using a mounting block is not a problem, and there are plenty of mounting blocks that we have from the medieval period, so we know they were used a lot. It basically makes it easier. It's a little bit like having a staircase instead of having to clamber up the side of a bus. You have steps to get on it. So using a mounting block isn't a form of cheating, it's actually a form of being decent. It's a way of not stretching the horse's back. Because when you get on a horse, and in Western Europe mostly you get on this side, which is called the near side, there is a certain twisting movement. So you can imagine you can pull the saddle down this way, and that will cause twisting on the spine, and we want to minimize that if we possibly can. Most horses are fine with it, and in a lifetime of getting on and off a horse it probably won't make much difference, but I just prefer it. I think it's nicer to not have that twisting movement if you can avoid it. So let me get on and let me show you some of the basics. When you are moving a horse around and you're not on the back of the horse but you've got a saddle on, The thing that can get in the way are stirrups. Stirrups will bounce around if nobody's in them, and you do what's called running them up. So that is just simply running the steels up on the inside there, and that keeps them more or less out of the way. You can loop this out of the way as well if you really want to. But this is just quite a convenient way and a tidy way of transporting a horse around. When you get on a horse, you obviously need to run the stirrups down. So you do exactly that. You just pull it down and pull it down. Check the girth. In this case, the girth needs to go up a little bit. It's a bit too loose to get on. Good boy. Over you come. Good lad. Stand. Good lad. You're always training a horse, so making him stand still when I want him to stand still is a very important part of horse behaviour and horse management. So I do the girth up gently, check how tight it is. It needs to be fairly firm because it's got to hold me on. When I get on the horse, it will compress the padding of the saddle even more, and I will probably need to do this up again. So you need to constantly be aware of the equipment you've got. And I imagine in medieval times that was the job of a squire or somebody associated with the knight. The knight himself probably didn't do much of this kind of thing for himself, but his squires might do, or his pages, or anybody looking after him or his horses. Good boy, walk on. Good boy. Now when you get on a horse, you always want to take up the reins a little bit. There's lots of different ways of doing this. You can do it like this, or you can just pull the reins through, hold it loosely. You don't want the horse to go backwards, but you don't want the horse to go forwards ideally. And in my case, I'm going to stand on this box. As I said before, it reduces that twisting movement. Reins are there to control it. Foot goes in, and your weight is over the horse, and you gently lower yourself into the saddle and put your feet on this side into the stirrup. Adjust things and you're ready to ride. When you are used to getting on a horse regularly and the horse is used to you getting on it, everything usually goes very smoothly. But it's always worth double checking everything's in the right place, because it's about safety and comfort, mostly for the horse, but also for the rider. And what I need to do in a modern saddle to check the girth is lean down and use my thumb just to put tension on the girth. It's very loose. So as I've sat down on this, he's relaxed, he's slightly reduced his barrel width just by sort of my weight on him. And so leg forward and do the girth up. Don't necessarily even need to look, you can feel where the girth is going, and then there you are, ready to go. What I'm going to do first is warm him up. This is really important for any athlete. It's important for me, it's particularly important for Ghost. He's got to be eased into the job he's doing. So we just walk around on a long rein, let him get used to me being on his back, and I can get sort of settled in, and we can all be calm and start everything nice and slowly. Most modern horses in the West have 4 broad paces. There's a walk, there's a trot, there's a canter, and there's a gallop. The walk is a 4-time pace. Each leg moves independently. The trot, diagonal pairs of legs move, so it's a 2-time pace, 1, 2, 1, 2. The canter is a 3-time pace because a pair of legs move at the same time, and the opposite diagonal pair moves separately. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then a gallop, which is effectively an extended canter, drops back into a 4-time pace again. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, because the horse is going at its maximum extension. There are modern day horses called tolting horses. They're Icelandic horses. They're usually quite small and feisty, and they are fantastic, and they do what's called a tolt, which is a style of moving the legs which is different from a walk, trot, canter or gallop. In medieval times, of course, we had amblers, and amblers were horses that walked very briskly, and I think that was likely to be a very, very fast and comfortable walk. And we also had tolters in medieval times as well, and I believe the origins of tolting come from the northeast of England. I'm not sure about that, but I believe they do. I believe that's what the genetics show. So let me show you some of these basic paces, and then we'll move on to more advanced things. Horses you will have seen in action. They might be in sports, but typically they'll be in movies and TV. And generally speaking, in movies and TV, especially when you've got an actor on a horse, they may be a variable skill in riding. Some of them are good riders. There's an awful lot that don't have a lot of experience. And so what you see is a very small subset of the manoeuvres that a horse can do on the battlefield. And I want to try and show you some of those manoeuvres now, bits and pieces, and show you how I try to get those kind of manoeuvres. But first, let me just show you the basics on Ghost. Walk up. Good boy. This is a walk. It's fairly brisk. As we've discovered, it's a bit faster than a human being walks. And obviously there are fast walks and slow walks, but it's nice and comfortable. If you're wearing armour, nothing jangles around too much. And it's a fairly steady, low energy kind of speed to go. This is a modern day trot. I don't particularly like the trot because you can see I'm bouncing around, and if I'm in armour, this jangles the armour a lot and feels very uncomfortable. I think this is very un-medieval. I don't imagine they'd have been bouncing around like this. There are two different types of way you can ride a trot. I don't know whether you can see. I'm now doing what's called rising trots, where I'm rising and sitting down every other pace. That's called a rising trot. And this is called a sitting trot, where I'm actually in closer contact with the horse more fully. This is a canter. It's, I find, a very, very comfortable pace to sit. I can do lots of other things. I can use one hand on the reins. It works well with armour. It's quite fast. It's probably the speed of somebody running quite briskly. Hey. And you can, of course, stop quite briskly from a slow, steady canter. I won't do a gallop because there's no point. We don't have a lot of space in here, and to get up to a proper gallop you need decent outdoor area. But basically, walk, trot and canter in a straight line are what most horses can achieve. Now, if you want to keep facing that way but go that way, you move backwards, which is fairly straightforward. Most horses are trained to go backwards. Come on, back, back, back. Good boy. And then you go forwards again. So you can maneuver backwards and forwards relatively easily. What I also want to show you are some of the more advanced ways of moving a horse. Imagine you have a line of soldiers all mounted on horses who need to close their ranks up. They need to form up. And they need to move sideways. Well, how do you do that? You've got to move that way. Well, this is how you do it. You make your horse go sideways. You can see how I can go sideways fairly easily on a well-trained horse and back the other way. So I could adjust the lines of horses and squeeze those ranks together to do the massive, solid, knee-to-knee charge that the Franks were famous for. That would require sideways movement, and as you see, Ghost here is very good at that. And I would imagine all of the horses of the Frankish knights could move sideways like that. Maybe not as neatly as he can, but moving sideways is kind of important. Good boy. Now you can also move sideways at a canter, at a trot and a canter, and I'll just show you that as well. That could be useful for adjusting the line of attack, for example. So let me just show you that. This will take a little bit more concentration. But imagine, good boy, imagine
I want to adjust my line of attack. You can see how, come on, over. You can see how we can move even at a faster speed if we were charging towards somebody and I wanted to modify who I was aiming for, or maybe I saw a gap in the enemy formation. Maybe there's a weakness in the enemy formation and I didn't want to angle. I could nudge my horse over at the canter and take advantage of that gap. So being able to go sideways on a horse is hugely important. And one of the other things that I think was probably used is the ability to effectively for your horse to be on his toes, a bit like a tennis player might be bouncing around on the balls of their feet, but you can have your horse ready to go at any moment, so you can go one way or the other or charge forwards. If your horse is just static like this is fine, this is nice and calm. But if I want to go forwards rapidly or backwards or sideways, there's a bit of a pause involved. But if I have my horse on his toes, bouncing around a little bit, it might be less comfortable for me, but it means that he can move more rapidly in any one direction. And as we know, fighting is about having small percentage advantages over your enemy. So keeping your horse on his toes is a very important part of it. Ghost here is quite good at this kind of thing. He's highly trained. I have my suspicions that there were a whole variety of different quality trained horses available. The very top destriers were probably like Ghost, very nimble, very capable. They do leg yielding, which is what I said about going sideways, backwards, forwards, all that kind of stuff diagonally. And there were probably lower range horses that were less well trained. You paid less for them, just in the same way that you would pay less for a sports car of lower quality than a super sports car. So you kind of pay for what you get, and with a horse it's exactly the same. And I imagine back then it was exactly the same. If you got one of the top destriers, it cost you a fortune. And if you got a middle ranking one, it could do some of the stuff, but you know, it would still be a good horse, but it wouldn't be top of the heap. So Ghost here is in training, and as I say, he can do all of these kind of maneuvers. So I'd like to think that he would have been a top destrier. I'll leave you to decide whether you agree or not. Right, let's show you what a warhorse can be trained to do, how we can maneuver on the battlefield, and how we can avoid the foot, and how we can take advantage of our height and our reach. So we'll do this at the walk first of all, because it's probably easier for you to see, but forwards is fine, backwards nice and straight forwards, but also sideways movement to keep facing the enemy. Come on, good boy, is really important. That means I can continue to look at the threat and I can maneuver my horse as I need to take advantage of the opportunities in front of me, just like I would need to move my legs if I was doing foot combat. And you can notice I'm doing this, I'm not looking at the horse, I'm using my own body weight or my own skills to keep looking, but to move him. Good boy, good boy. Now Warlord can do some fancy things like this. They're not necessarily battle maneuvers, but they are showing him what he can do. And there are maneuvers. Reversing is one thing, and obviously rearing is another area. Come on, just lifting off a little bit could be useful in a battle situation, just to make space amongst the foot soldiers. Imagine you're bogged down, surrounded by foot, and what you're doing is you're using the horse to kick and to push. Just threatening the foot, getting them to spread out, and then you go away. You don't stay there, you make space, then you get out of there and get a lance. This spear, or rather this stick, because it doesn't really have a spearhead on it, this is for training, is about the size of the lances we see on the Bayeux Tapestry, so middle of the medieval period. It's not particularly long. What's that? About 8 foot long, quite thin,
Doesn't need to be particularly thick because you just got to stab somebody with it. But it does give me quite a lot of reach away from where I am on the horse. If I need to stab, I can do that. We see people like this on the Bear Tapestry, throwing potentially. We also see people couch lances. It's a transitional period. We have a transition in the shield type. We have a transition in a lot of the equestrian techniques. We see couching and we see overhand in the same kind of image. So lances don't have to be big, long, heavy things. They can just be spears from horseback, because that's effectively what this is. And what you have to do when you train a horse to the spear, Warlord obviously here is completely oblivious and completely trained to all of this, but you move the spear simply around their head like this, get them used to it going past their nose, past their eyes, past their forehead. And what I do as well is tap the horse on the back of the neck like this, just so that he's not particularly bothered by it. You build up, you don't hit him hard because there's no point, but you gently tap, because these things might happen in the heat of battle. Brush his ears. Because spears, you don't necessarily hold them at one end, you can hold them in the middle or semi-middle for balance, and if you're not careful, you can hit them on the back. So what I do is I train just tapping Warlord a little bit on the back, very gently, just to get him used to it. The idea is that he should just ignore that kind of impact, as if nothing has happened. So if you do make a slight mistake in handling the weapon, and it just touches the horse a bit, it's not going to be a big issue. And this is what you do, and this is what must have been done in the medieval period. People must have stood next to a horse and then got on it and just tapped them with weapons, gently, 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 so that they're not hurting in any way, and got them used to it entirely. Then the next thing you've got to allow for is impact. Impact's a little harder to train for, but the way I do it is I lean down and push the horse a little bit. Push the horse a little bit so they get used to just a little bit of energy going through the rider and through the lance. Push back, push forwards. It just sort of gets used to it. Every aspect of training a horse to battle is doing small things in small increments until you can do the big thing. These two things don't go together. They sort of do, there's a shield and a sword, but this is a 15th century arming sword, single-handed sword for use on horseback or on foot. And this is an 11th century, 12th century Norman kite shield. They obviously would have never been seen together apart from in reenactors that don't understand history or situations like this. But it's still a sword, it's a one-handed sword, and it's a shield. And of course you can see all the action I've got, the horse, around here. I can cut, I can stab, not too far out, but I can stab there. I can also stab on this side. My feeling is, though, with a Norman shield, you would almost always have used a spear this way because it gives you longer reach. But we see in the 15th century treatises about how to strike with a sword, and a lot of them talk about having the sword on this side, riding towards your enemy and bringing the sword around this way. Now, it's interesting because a lot of people think you just chop this way. But of course, if you're riding towards somebody with your sword here, the other person knows exactly what you're going to do with the sword, which is you can bring it down. If you're riding towards them with a sword here, they're not quite sure what you're going to do. It can come sideways, it can come all the way over, or you can not actually do anything at all. You can just ride past them. So they talk about this being what's called the murder stroke on horseback, which is to go around like this. This would have been terrifyingly effective against foot, because you ride past foot, and there's a big swing, clang on their helmet, on their head, and they'd be very badly injured or dead. Bring it back again. So this is the biggest arc you can do. Also, it keeps your sword in front of you. If you're here, you're vulnerable. You've got all of this area is open, and if somebody stabs you, well, you've got nothing there. If you've got your sword here, and the sword is doing this arc, it's actually acting as a protection for you. So it's staying in front of you, which is a very important part of fencing. You try to avoid giving anybody a big opening like this. We'll see it in the movies and on telly. It's not really the way you should fight. You've got to keep the sword in front of you, like this. War horses were obviously very expensive. They were obviously very well trained. And I've put a lot of time into my relationship with Warlord, and Warlord has given me a lot of pleasure and fun in return. We have jousted at royal castles. We have competed against the French at Agincourt. We've done many adventures, and so I'm very fond and very proud of him. He's done an awful lot with me. I have a suspicion that knights back in the day, if they spent a lot of time with their warhorse, then they would have been just as close to their horses as I am to mine. And that's a wonderful connection with the past, because whilst knights might have been tough fighting men, well trained, trained to fight and defend, they also would have been human, and they would have cared very much about their horses.
I'm about to wear armour for the first time on Silver Moon, so I am somewhat nervous. If you fall over in armour, it makes quite a racket and can set the horse back as well, so I'm hoping he's okay. I've walked around him with the armour, so he's familiar with it as a concept, but I've not worn this much. And I thought you might be interested in seeing behind the scenes. This, of course, must have happened in historical times, because a horse won't just take armour without some training. So throughout the medieval period, you would have had not necessarily knights doing this, but people training horses, the squires, the grooms, all sorts, building a horse, especially a very expensive war horse, up to the point where they can take a knight in armour and, as importantly, go on the battlefield and deal with other knights in armour charging at them. So a horse doesn't naturally do this kind of thing, obviously. Some horses are bolder than others, and some are more nervous than others, and some, quite frankly, just won't take armour. I've got high hopes of Silver Moon, though, so we will see. Fingers crossed the end of this video isn't me landing like a stack of tea trays in the soil. Well, I've got much of the armour on. I've got my breastplate, placard, so chest protection, belly and groin protection, tassets, these things, they're mounted so that we can ride. And then I've got my leg armour on, no helmet, no pauldrons, no arm harness. That's to give me more flexibility for testing things out. I will go up to arms and then pauldrons, but effectively if the horse is okay with this, there's a very good chance they'll be okay with full armour as well, because it's the noise. It's this noise that causes the biggest problem, the noise of the tassets, and the fact that when you move, you make this kind of clanking, become a robot man. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. This is actually quite historical. We see quite a lot of reference material with body armour, sometimes not even leg armour, just body armour. Often people have a helmet with the body armour. Legs, body and helmet would be fairly standard, but it's all flexible. You can wear part of armour or all of the armour, and obviously the more armour you wear, the harder it is on you, and the more noise you make and the more tired you get. So ultimately, if you don't wear any armour at all, you're not protected either. So there's always a balance, depends what the threat is. The threat here today is Silver Moon objecting to me riding him in armour, which means I'll either have to steady him down and get off, or he'll throw me off, or he'll potentially throw himself to the floor and I'll land with him. So this is not particularly without risk, but I'm confident. I've done enough running up to this process to be quietly confident that he'll be okay. Who knows? Right, let's go and see him. Good boy. So I've just walked him from his stable in the armour to get him used to the noise, because there's the noise that's usually the biggest thing. The other thing is, when you're training a horse, you don't really want to, when it's like this, you don't want to make it into a big event, because then everybody's going to get stressed. So you've got to try and remain calm and not give them any signals, but they're very good at picking up body language. So he's fine so far. I have high hopes. You'll notice I'm in my 15th century reproduction war saddle, which is much less comfortable than my modern saddle in some ways, but it fits with my armour nicely. The armour and the saddle fit together quite well. It's an important component of wearing armour
is to have the right equipment, the right horse, the right saddle, and it, of course, would have normally been made to fit. So the saddle is made to fit both the warhorse and the knight as well. So it's quite a complex piece of information. This is why warhorses were so expensive. And it's not just the expensive horse, it's the expensive saddle, which is custom fit. It's the armour that's got to be fit to the saddle, saddle fit to the armour, and the horse, and everything has to come together. So the whole thing is an ensemble. You can't really have a proper warhorse without the right war saddle either. You notice the front of it protects me, and the big wings at the back theoretically stop me from falling off backwards. The problem with that is it means if it's a disaster, I can't get off very effectively. Good boy, ouch. That's a good start, biting me. Good boy, come on then. Let's get on you. Let's have a go. Good boy, hook up, hook up. Good boy, good boy. Here we go. Oh, that was a bit of a bad mount. I slipped slightly. That was my fault. Not a good start. He seems to be, wow, he seems to be very okay with it. Can you see how the armour, the tassets, are all fitting together here? So the front plate of the war saddle is meshing with the tassets and meshing with the cuisse, the thigh plates. So I'm going to go for a ride out to see how he is outside. This is an indoor arena. It's much more enclosed. He feels safe in here. He gets turned out in here sometimes, so he has a play. So what we've got to do is take him outside and see how he is in the great outdoors. See you out there. So far, so good. Good boy. Good boy.
And it's gone exceptionally well. I hadn't thought... I thought you might get the sound of tin trays falling on the ground, but we haven't had anything like that. He's been superb. Shows you that building up to him being with somebody in armour is really important. We've done this slowly. This is the first time. And he's been absolutely brilliant, so I have no concerns at all. I've got to try faster speeds with him, trotting and cantering, but he seems okay with it. So, yes, this must have been the feeling that a warhorse trainer would have had back in the day when they get on that warhorse for the first time and realize, oh my goodness, it's going to work. I've got something that can be a top destrier. So I'm very pleased, very exciting. Good boy, you done brilliantly. Oh, Tanner. Good boy. Now get up here.
I am super pleased. It's always worrying. He's a lovely horse. He rides incredibly well. He's very good with swords and lances and things like that. But we haven't tried him in armour before. So that is a major breakthrough. He isn't even stressed. There's a little bit of stress in his eyes. It's a new thing. You could see his body language wasn't completely relaxed. But he doesn't ride in that saddle very often. And he certainly doesn't see me riding him in armour at all. He will in the future. So I'm super pleased. So you'll notice I didn't do it for very long. I don't want him to get hurt or bruised or stressed in any way. So he's now going to have a roll and relax and have some hard-earned hay and feed. Good boy. Well done. Very proud of you. Let's get this. Let's get all this stuff off him. Good boy. Good boy. Oh. He's done incredibly well. I'm just going to go and check under his back. Check there's nothing obvious. No bruises. Good boy. Just wondering why I'm scratching your back, aren't you? Good boy. You'll notice he's losing his hair. This is his winter coat coming out, which means for anybody that has horses, it means horse hair is going to be everywhere for the next few weeks. But he is absolutely fine. Let's take his bridle off, let him have a roll and recover. Good lad. Good boy.
Good lad. He wants to scratch me, so that's what he does. He can't, because I'm in armour, so that's unfamiliar. Good boy. Well done. Good boy.
Let's say you've not paid your bill and you need to get on your horse very quickly, early in the morning. How quickly can you do that and make your escape? And also, what are the sort of things you need to be looking for when putting a saddle and a bridle on a horse? Good boy. Here we go. Good boy. Walk on. Walk on. Good boy. Walk on. Good boy. Here he is. This is Ghost, fresh from the stable. He's not too dirty, and therefore normally I would brush him down, but maybe I don't need to do too much at the moment. So what you need to be careful of is, for example, when the saddle goes on here, there's a lot of pressure on the back here and the front here. You want to make sure there's no bits that are going to stick into the horse, and under here as well. You just need to make sure it's smooth where the girth is going to go. You need to do it on both sides. You can do this with a brush, which is more traditional, or you can run your hand over it. I usually run my hand over the horse after I've brushed him as well, just to check, because the fingers can pick up lots of grit better than other things. That's it, both sides. He's now ready to saddle up, but also where the bridle goes, you can just check there's no mud. If he's come in from the field, of course, he's going to be absolutely filthy. And if you were doing something more formal, you'd groom him and brush his mane and tail and all that kind of stuff. But for the purposes of this, it's just sort of how you would get him ready to go. You'll notice he's in what's called a head collar to begin with. So he's just got something that's going to, well, allow him to be controlled. He's actually pretty good, probably doesn't even need this. So here's the bridle. The bridle has two ways round it can go. You can get them inside out sometimes as well. Good boy. Head up. Good boy. But what you want is the bridle's going to go on like this really in the reins. So the reins just slip over his head. With the head collar on, you then loosen the head collar and do it up again like this, because you've still then got control over him. And then holding it in your hands like this, you use this hand and a thumb to make him open his mouth and slip the bit in over his ears, sort out the mane, make sure that's nice and smooth. Doesn't really seem to affect the horse very much, but it sort of makes me feel it ought to be smooth for him, for his comfort. And I'm just going to do up the loose curb chain. The curb chain hardly has an effect. If you notice, I can move the bit quite a lot without it affecting the curb. And even if I pull quite hard, it hardly even feels on my finger. It just gives him some pressure here because that's how he's been trained. That's it, adjust this. And once you do the throat latch here, he's more or less, he's bridled up. I'm not doing this quickly on purpose. And then you would take the head collar off, or leave it on, quite frankly, if you want to take it with you. And you can put that elsewhere. Good boy. Come here. Good boy. Now with this particular medieval saddle, I use a thick felt pad to go underneath it. So that just goes over on his back. Come on, back up. Back up. Good boy. This goes over there. The saddle should fit behind his shoulder blades, here and here. So it's even on his back. You can see it's shaped a little bit to fit his back. That's just through wear. And then we'll get the actual saddle itself. This is my medieval saddle. Pull the blanket up into the gullet of the saddle. There should be no pressure on the horse's spine at all. A saddle is designed to spread the weight either side of the spine. There should be no pressure at all. Good boy, come here. Good boy. Good boy, come here. Good boy. This is the other side. You see the medieval saddle and the double girths there. And then I will come around this side, do them up. Good boy, stand. Good boy. Last check. Seems good. Good boy. Come round. Come round. Good boy. Whoa, 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 whoa. There you go. And you just jump on, check the girth, and off you go. Now, I was talking then, and I think you could probably do it a bit faster if you were rushing. But that's the basis of medieval saddlery. You want horse comfort first. If you're going to ride this horse for a day, you'll want to check there's nothing galling it, making it sore under the saddle. If that happens, you might not be able to ride the next day or quite a few days, if not weeks, while the horse heals. And you can leave marks as well. So there he is, tacked up fairly quickly and ready to go. Now I'm going to untack him and I'm going to stop talking and try and get him ready as quickly as possible, just to see what I can do as a speed getaway. Right, let's have a go. I'm making my getaway early in the morning. I haven't paid my bar bill and I've got to get away from town quickly. 3, 2, 1, go. Good start. You'll notice I've left the head collar on this time. It's just quicker because I need to get away as quickly as possible. Probably could get away with not doing the throat latch up, but anyway. Still got to make sure I can gallop far. Reins are in the wrong way round. Off I am, and I could get on. Stop the clock. I don't think that was many seconds. Just shows you if you needed to, you can make a rapid getaway on the horse. What I would do after that, gallop out of town or trot or walk quietly, depending on whether the town watch is active and the gates are locked, but make my exit, get a few miles outside town, just stop and check that the horse is comfortable and everything's set up, sitting right, maybe take the head collar off as well to make it more comfortable, stow it, that kind of stuff. So it's really quick. If your saddlery and tack, your bridle and saddle are somewhere to hand, which they probably would be in a stable where there's a livery stable, you'd have it right next to the horse. You can get away very, very quickly, assuming the horse isn't filthy. And quite frankly, even if the horse is filthy, you can put this stuff on, get away, get a few miles down the road, then check that it's not got any problems and reorganize and then go for your long adventure.
Hello everybody. We're about to go into the woods to do a photo shoot and I'm carrying a spear. And one of the things that's interesting is most people see spears on horseback being carried vertically because there's nothing above them. And when you go into the woods, you need to carry the spear in a different way. We know that because Dom Duarte of Portugal suggested it. Let me go and show you the problem. The spear gets caught up in the stuff growing above you. What he suggested as a solution is to carry it point downwards across your forearm. This is my interpretation of what he means by that. This seems to be the most comfortable way of doing it. Point down, not actually on the ground, like this. So let's have a go and see what this does when you're going through the woods. It actually does make a significant difference. You'd have to be careful about where the point was, of course, but it makes it much easier because if something does catch, it sort of just bounces off the butt end of the spear. You don't get it caught. So Dom Duarte, all those years ago of Portugal, thank you for that small piece of advice about carrying spears in the woods. Come on, boy. Hello. I've just been for a ride on Warlord in our reproduction 15th century saddle. I thought I'd take you through some of the points that make it different from a modern saddle. The front is very, very protective. This is what might be called a pommel, but it's a sort of plate. Sometimes these are coated in metal, but it also comes quite far down my thighs and protects this from impact. It also keeps me very firmly in the saddle as well. And then on the back here, the cantle, you've got these ears, which are quite closely fitted to me. And so I can ride quite comfortably like this, leaning back, locking myself into the saddle. What it means is the saddle's very bad for jumping, and my legs are very straight. And you see this in medieval documents all the time. You see people riding like this all the time, which is interesting. And this saddle makes it possible to do that. It's got the padding on underneath. I'll just jump off and show you a little bit about it. When you get off one of these saddles, you have to throw your leg over this because it comes, this can catch you out, especially when you're in armour. But if we look on the inside, you can see that it's cut away here. So this is just a bit of padding, felt, about an inch thick felt, which goes straight onto his body. So unlike a modern saddle, which would have a big piece of leather here and lots of padding, my leg goes straight onto his side. And it also has an awful lot of padding on the back. Padding on the back, padding on the front, but also it spreads the weight on the back here. This is particularly unique to medieval saddles, and this means you can ride in armour very effectively because the whole of the weight of the man in armour is spread across the front and the back of the horse. In a modern saddle, this is basically sawn off. You don't really get any of this weight bearing. The problem with that kind of thing, though, with this construction, is the saddle has to be made for the horse. So in modern militaries, in the 20th century, 19th century, obviously the tack was swapped over on lots of different horses, or the horse would be killed and they'd have to get another horse. These are custom built for your destrier, and this is custom built for my destrier. So the form and function and expense of a saddle are very, very important and integral to the success of a mounted knight. Hello, everybody. I am in the indoor school today because, wonderfully, it's raining. We haven't had rain on the farm for the better part of 2.5 months, and the grass really needs the rain. But not so good for riding around outside and filming. But nevertheless, we're lucky enough to be undercover. I have received recently a new sword, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit. This is a Norman sword. So, depending on your definition of medieval, I used to think of the Norman era as the beginning of the medieval period, and before that was the Dark Ages, before that was Rome. But recent scholarship has decided that the Middle Ages extend back now to Rome, leaving the shores of England. This is a sword of the type that might have been carried at Senlac Hill during the Battle of Hastings. So it has a classic Brazil nut shaped pommel, very simple, and it has an interesting leather scabbard, which is really what I want to talk about. So this sword is, let's say, 1066. This sword is 1485. This is modelled after one that might have been carried in the so-called War of the Roses on either side. You can see that basically one is arguably less sophisticated looking than the other. This one is actually lighter slightly, and this one is much more gilded, so it's much higher status. And of course, in those days, around the late 15th century, people had more money than they did at this period of time, sort of around 1066. But broadly speaking, they're both blades, they're both about the same length, and they are both effectively backup weapons. The primary weapon of a soldier, of a warrior or a knight was probably the lance or the spear or some other weapon, but these weapons were worn as backup weapons. But what I want to talk about a little bit is how you carry them on yourself and on horseback, because there's some things that I find curious about wearing a sword on horseback. This is a rather lovely leather form of suspension. Very straightforward. It doesn't even have a buckle for the sword, but what it does is it effectively goes round your waist, and then these leather straps go through this slot. This is of course conjectural. We don't really know how sword belts were attached. In fact, we don't really see many sword belts on the knights that were riding in the Bear Tapestry at all, which is interesting. If you look at it, they basically have spears and they have their armour, and that's about it. But let's have a look. So this ties up. I'm just going to tie it simply. And it suspends itself quite nicely at an angle, sort of on your hip. Now this is fairly okay when you're walking around. You have to be careful about this bit hitting anything, including Warlord here. So this is the 11th century sword suspension. And if I can get it off, let me show you the 15th century. Hello, Warlord. It does broadly the same thing, but in a much more sophisticated way, arguably, or rather more complex way, not necessarily sophisticated. It goes round, and it goes through, and attaches, let's say, to there. But then this bit is an additional suspension. So this sort of goes wherever you want to put it to keep the sword at a particular angle. So maneuver it around, and you can see that this is slightly lower. The other one was fixed here and was fairly robustly fixed. This is much more flexible and sort of jiggles around a lot more, but this is a lighter blade, and it could be worn over armour obviously, but it might be worn in soft kit. But it broadly does the same thing. It kind of keeps the sword by your side at an angle. When you're walking around, there's nothing particularly behind you, so the sword can do this. When you're on a horse, that hits the side of the horse. So I have all sorts of issues with wearing this particular sword on horseback. I'll swap swords over, and then I will show you one of the other issues about wearing a sword and getting on a horse. Very few people get on a horse on this side, and I'll show you why in particular, especially with a sword. It's quite awkward. The sword has to go around and over the horse, so you have to sort of get yourself on and put your leg over, which I won't do because it's really awkward. This way round, good boy. Good lad. Over you go. Good boy. Back. Good lad. This way, slightly counterintuitively, the sword's on the inside, so your foot goes in, your leg goes over, and the sword kind of sits where it ought to go. So this actually works quite well. This is a 15th century saddle, and this is an 11th century sword and sword harness. So the two wouldn't go together, but the 11th century saddles are not dissimilar to this. They don't have this part. They come up this far, and they tend to be cut away here, and the back is slightly different. But let me show you what it's like, good boy, when you walk around. It's actually not hitting too badly. Good boy. You see how the sword... Good lad. You see how the sword is carried on the inside of the arm here. So your natural position for your hand and arm when you're riding is like this. So there is a space for the sword to sit. Here's a conundrum for you, and I haven't really had this one particularly well explained. If you don't have armour on this arm and you draw the sword, and maybe you get it slightly wrong or your horse is playing around, if you draw the sword, you're drawing it on the inside of your arm. So I think people would have been very, very careful about that. The sword is sharp. You could do this, but it's really awkward. It just doesn't feel like it's suitable, and also you'd probably cut the upper part of your arm. So basically, I think what you try to avoid doing, you try to avoid having to draw your sword at the last minute. So you presumably hold the reins, drop your hand back, then pull the sword like this. Similarly, putting it away, being careful. I don't think there's much of a kind of theory of drawing the sword like there is in Eastern martial arts, where the draw of the sword is very important. I have a suspicion that because of the way this is suspended and way is worn, drawing it rapidly like that might cut the inside of your arm, which would be a bad thing. Doing that is really difficult. It is possible that swords were also carried on the actual horse or on the saddlery as well, potentially behind, dropped here and here. That's quite possible. But for now, I think that's a more likely, sensible thing to do. Drop your hand back, hold the scabbard, and pull the sword. Works exactly the same with the 15th century blade, except the 15th century blade is even less firmly attached to me than this is. And the other thing you'll notice, the end of the sword gets quite close to the flank of Warlord. So this area here is quite soft. And when you ride, it has a habit of doing this. And that is not a good thing on a horse. So maybe they carried the sword a little bit more, or just put up with the sword bashing against the horse. So you have to train the horse to be able to deal with the scabbard banging on its side. And if you have the sword at a different angle, it's going to bash on the back of the horse there as well. Now that's okay when I'm doing it a little bit for a minute or so, but imagine going on campaign and this constantly bashing on the side of the horse. If nothing else, it's going to annoy the horse, but potentially it could actually cause problems and injure the horse, which is exactly what you don't want. So I think perhaps riding with a sword like this was not something you would do for very long. You'd probably carry the sword elsewhere. Now, what I want to show you is me riding with the sword so that you can see how it actually bashes and crashes. So, at a walk, there's no problem. You've got your sword hand free. You can see you could potentially draw it, but basically it doesn't really get in the way. When you trot, it's a little awkward too. But I'm actually finding the 11th century sword easier to carry on horseback than the 15th century sword. That might be because it's actually more firmly fixed to me. Let me go in a canter. At the canter, you can see that the end of the sword... Good boy. Back. You can see the end of the sword is actually getting in the way a little bit of my wrist. I tend to ride, well, the medieval style is to ride with your hands quite high. This is also Spanish style, very different from English style, which is much lower down. But this actually gets in the way a little bit. So I wonder whether, again, you just had to modify your riding style when carrying a sword on horseback like this, or if, in fact, they didn't do it very often. Or maybe they suspended it differently. Maybe they learnt and had it more vertical, although that wouldn't work. If the sword was carried here in the scabbard, that might keep it out of the way. Possibly here. That might be quite a good thing to do, although that would be really hard to find if it was in a scabbard here. Maybe lower down is good, keeping it out of the way. And basically, swords being worn on horseback are actually surprisingly awkward. They do get in the way. But the one that still fascinates me is, how do you draw the sword? And I guess, since nobody ever wrote it down, and we don't see the action of drawing the sword at all on any of the manuscripts that I've looked at, I guess it is entirely up to us to try to work it out. But I think that hand back and drawing it this way is probably the safest. And you've obviously got to clear the horse, so you draw upwards and up and keep it there. You certainly don't want to draw through and injure the horse in any way. So, one of my passions is to learn about history by trying things out. And unless you are lucky enough to have a horse and a sword and an interest in history, you'll never know this tiny, tiny detail of how awkward it is to carry a sword on a horse. These are two swords separated by probably close on 400 years of technical innovation. They're basically the same. Bar of sharpened steel, pommel, crossguard. This one is a lot fancier, there's a lot more gilding on it, is arguably higher status and comes from a society with more conspicuous wealth. This is just coming out of the end of the Viking Age into the Norman Age and is still an effective weapon, backup weapons, mind you, but they're suspended in more or less the same kind of way. They come off your hip when you're riding the horse, and they're both awkward. They both bash against the side of the horse. They're awkward to draw, and I think that emphasizes the fact that these are backup weapons. They're partly symbolic, they're backup weapons. You have them there for an emergency, but basically, they're quite difficult to ride with. And I know you'd get used to it, and I don't ride that much with swords, of course, but I still find them surprisingly awkward, and they get in the way of controlling your horse. So that's one of the things that doing things practically shows you. Lots of people show the illustrations, and you see swords on the side of knights in armour, but nobody actually talks about how incredibly awkward they are when you're riding along with them.
Ooh, good boy. This is a typical... You can keep going if you want.
We're going to lift this up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good training for him. This is exactly what you see. You see this reaction, and then you just need to help give him confidence and move him away again. Talking to him all the time. Give him confidence. Keep him relaxed. Good boy. Good boy. Good lad. Good boy. You can see where his attention is from his ears. So he's paying attention. He's wondering what's here, and he's looking at it. Now his body language is relaxing a bit. None of this has actually hurt him yet, which is good. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. If I stand between him and a threat, he'll be less worried. So if I then step away, he'll be more worried. Good boy. Good boy. Good lad. Oh, come on. Come on. Come on. Good boy. Good lad. Good boy. Good lad. Good lad. When a horse starts chewing, he's less nervous as well. He starts using his jaw muscles. Big white thing, isn't it? I don't think he'll be that worried about it. What is that then? Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Come here. Come here. Good boy. Come to me. Come on. Good boy. Ooh. Good boy. Very brave boy, aren't you? Good boy. Good boy. Oh. Good boy. Good boy. All of this. Good lad. You can see by his behaviour now he's less worried. He's sort of less tense. His ears are all over the place. He's looking at lots of different things. Good boy, this way. That's the first stage of getting a horse used to doing stuff. You can see his body language is more relaxed. So now when I come in and ride him, after I've cleaned off this mud, it should be much less of a stress for him. He seems to be relaxed completely. I'll just take him past the pile on one more time. Good boy. What you mustn't do when you're training a horse for battle or for anything is force them into an uncomfortable situation, because then they'll build up resentment and they'll build up a negative attitude and a fear, and they'll think there's something wrong with the situation, even though there isn't. So gentle, as always, gentle encouragement of a horse is the key. And it must have been the way they were trained in medieval times too. Slow, gentle. If things are getting too much for the horse, you back off completely. You just let them take their time. Horses process things differently than people. They are sensibly scared of pretty much everything because they're a prey animal. They're designed to, well, their position in the environment is that they would be eaten by things, and therefore their natural response, if in doubt, run away. Good. Right. Phase 1 of training a horse for lights. Done. Come on.